Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar/workshop called Securing Employment. My name is Anya Siddiqui, and joining me again today is Zara. Hi, Zara.
Hi, everyone. Hope you all are doing well.
All right, so I'm super excited for Zara to move on. She gave us a really nice, informative webinar yesterday called Building Your Brand based on resume writing. So today I'm just going to go over a few slides before Zara takes over. So on the next slide, I just want to tell you about how to best watch the webinar. So I hope everyone knows that you are all on listen only mode, so we won't be able to hear you. But if you have any questions regarding the webinar, please type your questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be taking questions that are posted in the chat. We will only take the ones in Q&A. So please put the questions over there. And for best results, please use a laptop or a desktop computer. If you're using mobile devices such as tablets or cell phones, I suggest downloading the Zoom app and then using that instead. And over to the next slide, I just want to tell you a little bit about ACCES. We've been around for over 30 years helping job seekers such as yourself. Just in the past year alone, we served over 34,000 job seekers. We work with several employers, and we have over 30 tailored programs, such as sector-specific bridging programs, programs for youth, women, leadership, entrepreneurship, healthcare. So check out our website and see what program best suits you. We've got 6 locations in the GTA, with our 7th newest location coming up in Newmarket. And we offer online services, and right now that's all we are offering. Everything is being served online or over the phone. And I'll tell you more about how to get in touch with us after the presentation. So Zara, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Alrighty. So we're going to start the session by discussing the purpose of an interview from the perspective of both the candidate and the employer. We're going to go through the stages of an interview and the different types of interviews that you might take part in. We'll also spend a significant amount of time talking about the different types of questions that you'll be asked during an interview and how to answer those interview questions. We'll also be discussing strategies to be used during and after the interview to ensure your success. So let's go ahead and get started. Interviews are different in different countries, different cultures, and different sectors, and even in different companies. However, the purpose of an interview is the same, regardless of how the interview is conducted. An interview is an exchange of information between the employer and the candidate to see if you're a good match for the role. There are 2 parties involved in the job interview, the person being interviewed and the person doing the interview. The 2 parties have different goals and objectives for the interview. As a person being interviewed, you have to have the following goals. Keep in mind to obtain information about the job and the organization, to market yourself, your skills and experiences which are relevant to the position, to communicate value that you will bring to the company, and to determine whether or not the job is suitable for you. The interviewer, on the other hand, has their own goals and objectives. Their goals and objectives are to promote the organization and to attract the best possible candidates. They also want to gather information about the candidate during the interview process. They want to assess how well the candidate's qualifications will match the job requirement, and they want to determine whether or not the candidate will be a good fit for the position and the organization as well. Both the candidate and the interviewer are looking for the right fit. Let's take a closer look at this concept since it's the core of our outcome for an interview. Right fit means that who you are as a candidate fits what the company is looking for. This means that you have the professional experiences, education, qualification, technical skills, and requirements for the position. You have effective communication skills, you're enthusiastic, motivated, and interested in the work being offered, and you have the grooming appearance and suitability for the position. Your salary expectations are in line with what can be offered, This also means that your value systems are aligned with the values of the company. Here's another way to look at the interviewers trying to determine throughout the interview process. First, they want to know that you can do the job. In other words, do you have the required ability? Second, they want to know that you have the right attitude. In other words, are you interested in the work that's being offered? And are you interested in working for the company? Companies don't want employees who just want a paycheck at the end of the day. They want employees who actually care about the work that they're going to be doing for the company. And third, they want to know that you are easy to supervise and that you can be trained to do the job. No manager wants to take excessive amount of time and spend a lot of energy supervising and training an employee. This is called manageability. Finally, the company wants to know if you're committed to the job and the company. In other words, once you're hired, will you stay? It takes a lot of time and money to hire a new employee. Employers don't want to go through the hiring process to make a selection and then have to go through the whole process again if the person leaves after shortly being hired. Companies are looking for employees in whom they can invest their time and train, and they want to get a return on that training. We're going to be looking at the different stages of an interview. So let's start with the first stage. The interview begins similarly to any conversation with greeting and small talk, initiated by the interviewer. The purpose of this stage of the interview is to put the candidate at ease and to establish rapport and find comfortable level of communication. To prepare for the stage of interview, brush up on your greeting and small talk skills. Also, make sure that you have a good handshake ready. Here are some greetings that you might hear. It's nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to inviting me. So these are some of the greetings that you can use and for small talk as well. At the second stage of an interview, the interviewer provides general information about the organization and the job. The interviewer then asks questions so that the candidate can share general information about themselves. At the third stage of an interview, the questioning gets much more detailed, direct, and targeted. The interviewer asks very specific questions to determine if the candidate is a good fit for the position that the company is looking to fill. At the fourth stage of the interview, it is your turn to ask specific questions about the organization. You should be prepared for the stage by having at least 2 to 3 questions already thought of and ready to ask. And lastly, the fifth and final stage of an interview, the interviewer summarizes and clarifies information you shared and discussed in the interview. The interviewer will tell you when a decision on filling the position will be made and how that decision will be conveyed. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. So I'm going to walk you through the interview process. So after applying for a role, your resume gets shortlisted. You then receive a phone call, and in that phone call, the representative will do basically a general pre-screen, will ask you basic questions, and you'll be invited for an in-person interview. And following that, you may be invited for further interviews. And that will lead to then hopefully you securing employment and successfully being offered job posting, or sorry, job offer. Okay. Even though all interviews follow the same basic structure, there are many different types of interviews. Employers will select the type of interview that matches their goals. The type of interview falls into 4 main categories. There are different types of interviews according to their purpose, their format, channel, by media which the interview is conducted, and the questioning style. There are 2 main purposes for an interview: to screen candidates and to make a selection for the job. A screening interview is used to quickly and efficiently ensure that only suitable candidates are interviewed more extensively. A screening interview is often conducted over the phone, and this type of interview is short and to the point. The interviewer has a brief list of set of questions that they use. On the other hand, a selection interview is used to fully explore the qualifications of a candidate with the end goal of making a final hire. Interviews can also be categorized by format, specifically by the number of interviewers. The majority of interviews are done on one-to-one format. This is the most commonly used, where there is one interviewer and one candidate. The other format is search committee or interview panel. This format, there is one candidate and multiple interviewers. This format is usually used for higher level positions. And group interviews. This is used to interview multiple candidates with multiple interviewers, and it is used to assess group interaction. There are two main channels of communication for an interview, in addition to the standard face-to-face interview. The first channel is frequently that is used is the telephone. Phone interviews are usually used for screening interviews. The challenge with phone interviews is that there is no visual information to facilitate communication. Both interviewers and the candidate only have verbal information when communicating. They can't see any facial expression, body language, gestures, or visual information. Another channel that is being used more and more frequently is video, either through video conferencing equipment or through internet-based applications such as Skype. Video allows interviewers and candidates to be in different locations but still have visual information as a part of their communication process. So for phone interviews, some tips to remember are your tone and your voice must convey suitability and interest. Make sure that you are in a place where you can read notes, take notes, and concentrate. If you cannot devote enough time to a phone interview, suggest an alternative time to the recruiter or to the manager that's contacted you. Have your resume in front of you so that you can remember highlights of your experiences and responsibilities along with your accomplishments. And end the interview with a question and ask for next steps. Don't have your responses sound scripted. Don't feel that you have to fill the silence. You can ask a follow-up question if you feel the need to. Don't chew gum or have food or be sipping on a drink during an interview call. Now that we've covered the structure of an interview and the different formats, it is time to dig a little bit deeper and look at the actual questions you'll be asked during an interview. There are 4 different types of interview questions that interviewers use to gather information they need in order to make a hiring decision. These question types are general, personal attribute, technical, and behavioral. General questions are used to open an interview. They allow the interviewer to gather background information on you to get a general sense of your education and your work experience. Personal attribute questions allow the interviewer to explore who you are as a person. Technical interview questions are used to determine if you have specific technical skills that are required for the position. And finally, behavioral questions are used to determine how you react to specific situations. Let's take a more detailed look at each of these question types in turn, starting with general questions. General questions serve as an introduction to who you are and what you have accomplished so far in your career. When answering general questions, describe your qualification, career history, and range of skills. You should also emphasize steps in your career and skills that are more relevant to the job when you are answering general questions. We will look at some of the most commonly used general questions and suggest ideas on how to answer them. So tell me about yourself is a commonly used general question that is used at the beginning of an interview. It seems like an innocent question. However, the way you answer it will set the tone for the remainder of the interview. A good way to answer this question is by keeping in mind who you are, what you've accomplished, and your future goals. Here's a really good example of someone that answered this question. The employer will ask, "Tell me about yourself," and the person will respond, "I have spent the last 6 years developing my skills as a technical project manager at ABC Company. where I have won several performance awards with successfully completing 5 key projects, and I have been promoted twice. I love managing projects and solving challenging technical problems. Most recently, I led the development of an award-winning new trading platform, and I'm a person who thrives in a fast-paced environment. So right now, I'm looking for an opportunity to apply my technical experience and my creative problem-solving skills at an innovative software company like yours. Another general question that's always asked is, what are your general salary expectations? We don't like to talk about money and put a dollar value to our skills and experiences. However, we may find ourselves having to answer this question. So in order to answer this question, make sure you've done your research previously and explore salaries similar to the related positions. Don't use a specific number, rather use a range. Finally, demonstrate flexibility and indicate that you are willing to be compensated in other ways if necessary. So for example, vacation days, benefits, time off. Here are some examples of what this might sound like during an interview. So an employer may ask, what are your salary expectations? And your response might be, in my research, I've learned that this position typically pays between $65,000 to $75,000. However, the salary is not my main concern. I'm really interested in working for your company, and I'm open to negotiation. I'm sure that a reputable company like yours will pay a fair salary, and your job posting gives a range between $65,000 to $75,000 anyways. So I'm satisfied with that range, and I will be happy to negotiate further once the decision has been made. So this would be the appropriate response to answering that question. Personal attributes. Personal attribute questions are the second type of interview questions you can expect to be asked. Personal attribute questions are used to uncover who you are as a person, including your professional values, ethics and principles, your natural strengths and weaknesses, talents, interests, and passions, along with your work style. The interviewer wants to determine if you are a good fit for the organization. Here are some examples of personal attribute questions that an employer may ask you. Describe your working style. Describe your top 3 skills. Describe your strengths. Describe your weaknesses. How would you approach certain situations and tasks? What are key principles or values you apply to your work? And what are you most passionate about and why? Probably the most challenging attribute question to answer is, what are your weaknesses? Now, you don't want to draw attention to your personal flaws. However, you want to demonstrate that you're self-aware, that you know that you have areas of improvement. Select one specific weakness to discuss and then indicate what strategy you have implemented to improve this area. Here are some examples of what this might sound like. An employer may ask you, what are your weaknesses? And you can say, although I'm proficient in many software programs, I'm sharpening my Excel skills so that I can be quicker. Another example you can use is, I can't think of any weaknesses that would create difficulty for me in doing my job. However, I'm always looking to improve myself. And currently, I'm a member of Toastmasters, where I can develop great confidence in making public presentations. Another example is, I understand how important certification is for this sector, and I've also booked my exam, and I plan to be certified by the end of the year. Technical questions are the next type of interview questions you can expect to be asked. Technical questions are used to determine if you have the required technical skills for the position. Even if you're not applying for what you consider to be a technical job, you will still be asked technical questions because every job has the technical aspect. Now, here are some examples. These examples are related to the field of IT. However, depending on your industry, the questions might obviously be different. So what coding languages do you use? How do you keep yourself updated with the information security news? The world has recently been hit by blank attack virus. What have you done to protect the organization as a security professional? And the list goes on. Behavioral questions are the final type of questions that an employer may use to ask the candidate, and most candidates find the style of questioning the most challenging. Interviewers place a lot of importance on how candidates will behave on the job when they make their hiring decision. Ideally, interviewers would like to be able to see you on the job before making a hiring decision, but since this is not practical, behavioral questions are the next best option. It is therefore important for you to ask candidates to be able to accurately convey how you behave in the workplace. There are two types of behavioral questions, hypothetical questions and past behavioral questions. Both types of behavioral questions allow the interviewer to get a sense of how you will act and react in different situations that occur in the company and on the job. A good technique to use when answering past behavioral questions is a technique called SOAR, S-O-A-R. S stands for situation, O stands for ownership taken by you, A stands for action, and R stands for result. An example of a behavioral question that an employer may ask you is, if you had a conflict with a coworker, what would you do? Or tell me about a mistake that you made at work and what do you do to resolve it? So these are some examples, and you can also Google behavioral questions and find questions that are sector specific and practice. Now, most candidates think that interviewers can ask whatever they want in an interview. This is actually not the case. There are some questions that are illegal for an interviewer to ask. The Ontario Human Rights Code protects people against discrimination. It forbids employers to ask certain kinds of questions in the job interview, unless it's a reasonable requirement for the job. The interviewer or the employer cannot not ask candidates about their age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or color, unless the candidate decides to self-disclose. Even though there are illegal interview questions, employers may ask these questions anyways, either by mistake or knowingly. You as the candidate then have to decide how you're going to respond, and you have three options to consider. Option one, you can tell the interviewer clearly and directly that this is an illegal question and that you will not be answering. Option two, you can answer this question if you don't feel that it will You can answer this question if you don't feel that you will be discriminated against. And option three, you can take a few seconds to think about it and to determine the underlying concern that the interviewer has in asking this question. And rather than answering the question right away, you can direct the underlying concern. So for example, if the interviewer asks you, how old are you? But you feel that the underlying concern is whether or not you have the physical strength to do the job, you can respond by saying, I'm in really good shape and I can handle physical strenuous activities. Here are some more ways to respond to illegal questions. You could say to the employer, could you tell me how my age, marital status, place of birth, religion might have any bearings on the job that I'm applying for? You could say, that's an interesting question. I'd be happy to answer that. Can you tell me the reason for asking? Can you please tell me why you might be asking this question? So these are all ways to rebuttal illegal questions. One final thing to note about interview questions is that all of the questions should not come from the interviewer. As the candidate, you should be asking questions during the interview process. Most interviewers allow for a few minutes at the end of the interview for the candidate to ask questions. And you can also ask questions throughout the interview process as they arise during conversation. One of the reasons it's important to ask questions during the interview is that it shows that you're interested in the position. Part of your interview preparation should be preparing 2 to 3 questions about the company and wanting to know more. So these are some questions that you can ask the employer at the end of the interview. So what are your company plans for the future? Or what are the company plans for future growth? What is the normal career path for someone in this position? Can you tell me a little bit more about the team and department I'll be working with? In order for you to be successful in your interview, you need to prepare. So just keep in mind when your interview is, where your interview is, what the position is that you're applying for, who you will be interviewing, and how the interview will be conducted. Also, keep in mind, it's always good to research, rehearse, relax, review, and reward yourself. And we're going to be taking a look at the 5 R's in more detail. The first thing you want to do before an interview is research the company. Use the internet and your personal contact and network to find out more about the company's history, product, and services. If possible, you should also find out about the management style and about the company culture. Find out the name and the position title of those who will be interviewing you. And finally, you should find out the exact location of where the interview will be taking place and how you will be arriving on time. Once you have finished your research, you will then need to move on to the rehearsal step. This is a step that is still before the interview, in which you will get ready to answer interview questions. Make a list of questions you anticipate for specific interviews. Prepare the answers to these questions. You can write it out, you can rehearse it. Practice your answer with someone who is familiar with the field, a friend, a colleague, acquaintance, or even practice in front of a mirror. Understanding and anticipating interview questions that you will be asked is really, really important for securing employment. For each job that you're applying for, use the job posting to determine what general questions may be asked, along with personal attribute questions, technical skills, behavioral questions. Once you've determined the questions that you will be asked, prepare answers for each of the questions. Then practice these answers out loud. Even better, practice with a friend, colleague, or family member. Finally, you should also be able to prepare a list of questions that you want to ask the interviewer. Don't forget to relax. It's important to ensure that you're in the right place of mind, mentally, emotionally, physically, before your interview. It's okay to have some level of stress and also be excited at the same time. However, too much stress can also be overwhelming and may impede on your presentation or your ability to answer questions. Before the interview, do something for yourself. So take a walk, eat some chocolate, listen to your favorite song, or read your favorite book. Make sure that you have a good night's sleep before the interview and have a good breakfast. You don't want to fall asleep during your interview or have your stomach making noises. Things to keep in mind to bring to an interview. So bring several copies of your resume. Bring a list of your professional references. However, hold off until you are required to present those forward. So if an employer doesn't ask you for your references, don't give them. A list of questions that you have about the company and the position, a portfolio if this is applicable to you. Always have a pen and paper, notebook, and some water. Remember to dress for success as well. So dress one step above of what you would actually wear on the job. Dress in clothing, shoes that are comfortable and are in good condition. I always go by the 3C rule: clean, covered, and comfortable. So try to keep that in mind when deciding what to wear for an interview. Avoid wearing too much makeup, nail polish, or jewelry, and don't use strong perfume and cologne, as some places are scent-free. Remember, your body language can say more about you than your mouth. So make sure you keep in mind how you're sitting, how you're positioned, and you will always want to have good posture. Now let's move on to what you should keep in mind during the actual interview. So smile. So make sure you're smiling and greeting people. Make sure you're making eye contact. Use the interviewer's name. Shake each person's hand if there is more than one person interviewing you. Speak with confidence. Speak at an appropriate volume and speed. So if the interviewer has to keep saying, pardon me, more than once, that usually means that you're not speaking loud enough or that you're speaking too quickly. So keep in mind to adjust your volume and speed in this situation. All of these behaviors will tell the interviewer that you are a professional, personable, and confident individual. When you're answering the questions during an interview, keep the following in mind. Be sure to understand the question before you answer it. Always ask for clarification if you need it. Take a few seconds after hearing each question to formulate your answer and think before you speak. You don't have to rush right away and answer the question. Keep your answers brief, under 2 minutes. If the interviewer wants more detail, they will ask for it. So don't keep talking until the interviewer interrupts you. Keep an eye out on time. If the interviewer is wandering while you're speaking, that's your clue that you've spoken too long. As the interview draws to a close, remember to do the following. So provide a list of professional references that the interviewer can contact, but only do this if they ask for it. Ask for next steps in the hiring process as a time frame, and ask for the time frame as well. Reinstate your interest for the position and thank the interviewer for their time. Right after the interview, as you get home, take some time to assess how the interview went, reflect, and really make notes on areas where you can improve for next time, and make note of things that you did that went great. After you have reviewed your performance and you've had time to think, you have one last step to complete, and that is to send a follow-up email. Sending a follow-up email shows that you're motivated and excited, and you're acknowledging the interviewer for their time. And don't forget to reward yourself. So you've worked so hard, you've submitted your resume, you've made it that far, you're now hopefully going to get a job offer. So don't forget to treat yourself, and then you start the process all over again for your next interview. So that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for tuning in with me, and I hope that you'll be successful in securing employment.
Thank you so much, Zara. That was a lot of information, and we were seeing some questions here. So everyone, Zara will be taking your questions now. You can start typing them into the Q&A tab. Please do not type them into the chat, okay? So we'll take all your questions into the Q&A tab. So, all right. So I guess you talked about, yeah, so you said, Zara, you mentioned not to put your picture on your resume, and well, I can answer this one. Kitty, you're saying, what about LinkedIn? Your profile picture will show your race and even religion. Your picture should not be able to tell anything about you, so it should be just a professional headshot. I wouldn't put a picture of you standing in front of like your house or in your house or outside on the street. It should be with a plain gray neutral background, a professional headshot. So hope that helps answer your question. Next question here is, if anyone applies for admin or HR related jobs, will they still ask technical questions related to the job?
So like I mentioned, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so like I mentioned, every job has some aspect of technicality. So whether it's the software that you're using, so Excel is a technical skill. So in that respect, yes, you may be asked about previous software systems that you've used, especially in HR, as there's so many different applicant tracking systems like Taleo, Salesforce, SharePoint, Bullhorn. So these are some of the tracking systems that I'm speaking from the top of my head, but those are some technical skills that you may have to share during an interview.
Thank you. And the next question here is, so maybe you could address this for a lot of people. A lot of women want to know how to handle the question about having a gap on your resume because you've had a child.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. And again, I think that there are two things that we have to look at, is the type of resume that you're using and how you're answering that question. Now, going on maternity leave shouldn't discriminate you from coming back into the workplace. So if that's something that you're experiencing trouble with, then you have to think about how you're answering your question and how you formatted your resume. Sometimes it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. So keeping in mind that your responses are solid, because that can also impact the hiring decision.
Thank you. Next question is, who are your professional references?
So your professional references could be, and I touched upon this in yesterday's workshop. So any of your managers, direct supervisors, your colleagues, professors. Please avoid using family and friends as references. So anybody that you've worked with in a professional capacity, it could even be, you know, people that you volunteered with or you've reported to them, you know, senior management or coordinators. So you can use those as professional references.
Thank you. And let's say you had an interview and then you didn't hear back from an employer. When should you send your second follow-up email?
I would say wait at least 5 business days. So you would send your first follow-up within, I would say, 24 to 48 hours, and then you would wait 4 to 5 business days, and then you would follow up again with them.
And
unless they've given you a timeline. So some employers may say, well, we're still in the process and we're going to be interviewing for the next 2 weeks. So they've given you that timeline, right? So they've established that you might hear back from them within 2 weeks or at the 2-week mark. So just keep in mind the timeline that you've been given.
Perfect, thank you. And on your first follow-up email after an interview, when is a good idea to send it and what should you mention in that email?
So like I mentioned earlier, so it's anywhere from 24 to 48 hours would be a good response time. And then in that email, again, you're just, it should be very, very brief, not lengthy at all. So you're just thanking the interviewer for their time. Again, reinstating your interest as to why you're the suitable candidate or why you're the ideal candidate for the role. And you look forward to hearing next steps and you're really excited. So again, making sure that the excitement and the dedication really comes through in that communication piece.
Thank you. Zara, can you go back to the, I'm not sure, was it SOAR or SPARK for
Sorry.
the situation action result? Could you just go over that again for some people just to clarify?
Yeah, so let me just go ahead and pull up the slide. So,
just a general overview. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, for
so
sure,
you can just speak to the slide again.
Definitely. So again, there are different types of questions that employers ask. And for behavioral questions, there's a strategy to answering this question. Now, there's also a STAR method, there's SOAR method. There's so many different strategies out there to help you answer behavioral questions, because essentially an employer wants to know, okay, were you in a situation? How did you handle that situation? What was the action that you took and what was the result that was attained from that situation? So I think I provided an example. An employer may ask you, how did you handle conflict with a coworker? So then you're going to have to think about a situation. Remember a time, if there was a situation, if you had a conflict with a coworker, then the ownership that you took. So what was the communication that happened and what was the action from that communication? And then the result that was attained from following the situation, ownership, and action.
Thank you.
So I hope that was able to clarify.
Yeah, I know you went over it before too, so I think that was pretty good. And if you're coming to an interview, do you need to bring any sort of documents from your previous employer?
No, I don't think that you're required to bring a record of employment. I don't think so, no.
Okay, thank you. And if someone's resume is designed for a different market, as in like this person says their resume was designed for the Middle Eastern market, would you suggest to change it to a Canadian style resume?
Yes, 100%. So your resume needs to be tailored to Canadian standard, as we have a different structure and format that we follow and that a lot of employers are familiar with. So if they see that your resume is not formatted in that way, then you may lose out on that opportunity to be considered for next steps.
Perfect, thank you. Next question here is it true that employers really put a lot of emphasis on soft skills in a candidate?
Yeah, definitely. I think that soft skills are really, really important because technical skills are something that you can learn, but soft skills are something that you can learn them. However, they're more they're more natural. You know, you can't tell someone to be nice, right? But you can teach someone how to do data entry. So there definitely is a component of soft skill that is given, I guess, more preference to. However, again, you need technical skills as well because you need to be able to perform the duties of the job according to the job responsibilities and requirements.
Thank you. Let's say if a company's job profile doesn't match your resume, can you still apply for that job?
I would say try to tailor your resume. So in yesterday's presentation, I shared a resource. It's called JobScan. So if you just Google JobScan, you can definitely upload the job description or the job posting and upload your resume to see how compatible you are to do the job. And then that way you'll get your answer and you'll see what you're missing, because if you don't have the requirements to complete the job, then why are you applying? That's my question.
Okay, this is a good question here. If I feel that I answered a question incorrectly during the interview, can I clarify in a follow-up email saying like what they should have said about that question at the time?
You know, this is a really tricky one, and I've actually been asked this question in the past as well. I think that you have nothing to lose if you follow up, if you write it in a way where you're basically reflecting or showing that you're reflecting on the questions that were asked. I think at the end of the day, you know, it would work towards your advantage. But I'm not saying use the strategy always. But if it was a question that, you know, you think could have made a decision whether or not you were selected for the role, then I would say you can go ahead and in your follow-up email, maybe touch very briefly on that question and say, you know, after further reflection, I felt as if I wanted to add a couple more points to the question that was asked. But it's all about how you write it.
No, that's perfect there. That was a great answer, actually. I hope everyone wrote that down. That's a very good way of answering and tackling that issue. Another question is, about salary expectations. Can you, like, let's say if you really want a job and they ask you for salary expectations, can you say that you're open to anything, or should you have a range in mind?
Definitely. I would say that you can always ask. You can say, what is the role paying, or what is the salary bracket for the role? Usually the HR manager or the person that's interviewing you will be transparent enough to share that information, or they'll give you a range. And then they'll ask you, is that range suitable? And then you can decide whether or not. I think just saying, oh, I'm open to anything kind of shows a little bit of desperation. So you want to be able to be confident in your abilities and know your market value. So, you know, answer that question, but answer it confidently, or ask that question confidently.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zara. Great answers there and good questions on your end as well. So if I guess you have to talk about your experience outside of Canada, right? If you don't have any Canadian experience, should you talk about the company as well, or should you focus on your experience?
You can talk about both, you know, depending on the questions that are being asked. If you feel that integrating the company title, maybe the company that you work with was international, you know, and it's very prestigious. So you want to kind of show that off or showcase that. But if you want to focus more on your title, so for example, if you're a senior project manager, or if you were a team lead and you want to focus more on that, then by all means, you can share that experience. And I think, again, it's going back to really thinking about what the employer is asking you and then answering the question.
Perfect, thank you. And how do you ask the interviewer for his email? Like if you want them to follow up later, like is it okay to ask during the interview for an email?
Yeah, so you can always ask for a business card. A lot of professionals have business cards. It's a common practice. So you can just say, you know, I'd love to touch base with you if you have a business card. rather than trying to scramble their email or phone number down, just ask for a business card.
Perfect, thank you. And I think you've gone over stuff like this, but when they ask you what's your weakness, can you say something like, oh, my language fluency is not the best, or should you say something along those lines?
That's a good question. To be honest, this is always a tricky question because I feel that the individual really needs to know themselves thoroughly in order for them to answer this question. The employer is essentially wanting to know whether or not you're a good fit for the job, right? And they're not really wanting to see like problem areas. So you don't have to put yourself down, but if you feel as if maybe your articulation skills are not the best, but you're working on them, that's something that you can share. So again, ending off on a positive note. So you can say, yes, unfortunately, my articulation skills are not the best. However, I'm taking language classes, or, you know, I'm taking further measures to improve my articulation skills to improve that area. And just indicating that, you know, you're taking measures to take action.
Thank you, Zara. And the trick is to not focus on an actual weakness when you're answering this question. This could be
Definitely.
something like, you know, like, let's say our job doesn't really require public speaking, and you can say, well, you know what, I've been looking into public speaking recently because I thought that was something that I'm, you know, lacking strength at. So I've been taking courses or classes or something, and I'm working on it. So, you know, it shouldn't be something that directly affects her job either. So when you do answer it, they think, oh, well, okay, that doesn't, you know, make a difference in his performance in this new role.
Definitely.
Where can we get a Canadian style resume? A lot of people are asking questions. Actually, Zara will answer this one because a lot of people are asking questions how they can get resume help. If you look at the slide in front of you, it says that we can help you. You can go and, you know, check out any of our resources. You can call any one of our offices that are closest to you. So if you're in Toronto, you can call our Toronto office. If you're in Brampton, call our Brampton office. And you can speak to an employment consultant, and they can virtually help you in setting up your resume or helping you go to resources. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Okay. So next question here is, how do I answer, have I ever had a conflict with a colleague?
How do you answer that question?
Yeah, what's the best way to answer that question?
Okay, so I think I went over this a little bit earlier, but talking about the situation, you know, and then also taking ownership. So explaining whether it was your fault or their fault, or, you know, how you handled the situation. So then going on to the action and then the result of that. And a lot of times, you know, people are fortunate and they haven't encountered the situation, and maybe the employer may ask that question. So you can say, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, I've never come across any conflicts with my coworkers. However, if there were to be miscommunication, or if there were to be any, you know, discrepancies between us, then I would take this action to resolve this matter.
Thank you, Zara. Another question here is, when you go to for an interview, what do you carry with you? Like a bag or a folder with accessories? Like what's ideal to carry with you?
So I definitely say have a folder. So you never want to fold your resume. You should always keep it in a hard folder. And you can get those from Staple, like they're literally 99 cents. Or even Dollarama, and just make sure that you have a purse with you so you can carry your water bottle, your phone, and your phone should always be off as well, or on vibrate. You never want to take a call or respond to a message during an interview. That's a no-no, definitely.
Perfect, thank you. Last question here is, when attending a panel interview, should you hand over your resume to each interviewer or just one? How would that work?
So you should always, I think, to be safe, you should always have 5 copies of your resume, single-sided, in your resume folder. And you should also find out how many people will be on the panel. And so when you do your phone screening or your first round of interview, this would be the time to ask who would be interviewing you next, and then determining how many copies of your resume you will require. And make sure that every single person on that panel has a copy of your resume. And you know what? They may already print it out even before you decide to give it to them. So they may have it beforehand, but that'll just show that, you know, you came prepared.
Perfect. Thank you. And answer the rest of the questions. I think we're done, but the questions here are related to our online. So Zara, have you been helping anybody online? Any new clients or anybody you've helped over the phone?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you can see that we do have employment consultants that are helping people live online, whether it's through Zoom or through phone calls. So if you look at the screen right now that I've had up for a while now, we have webinars. There's new webinars posted. We usually have about 6 webinars a month. I think in April we have about 14 or 15 webinars. So please go have a look at that. That's a really good resource for your job search. Also, our e-resource, you can check out accessemployment.org. We have lots of resources online for you to look at. And then if you want to practice your English, we've got as well. And again, you can go on our webinar page. Everything is listed there. And again, if you want to speak to someone in person, we're not taking in-person appointments at the moment, as you all know with the current situation. Everyone's staying home and staying safe, I hope. And but you will be able to speak to an employment consultant. So call your closest ACCES location, which you can find on our website, and you can take it from there. Again, Zara, thank you so very much for today.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was a great webinar and you answered the questions so well. We really appreciate having you on today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was my pleasure. On behalf of you, my pleasure. Yeah.
So thank you, and thank you all for attending. I hope everyone has a great day or evening ahead, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.